I was standing no more than 5 feet away when my daughter smiled at a guest and said, "Oh, she's just helping with some last-minute dress fixes." She was talking about me. I was still holding the needle and thread that had saved her wedding dress less than an hour ago. Immediately I heard those words. My hands froze midair like I'd suddenly become invisible. No one questioned her. No one looked twice at me. So I did the only thing I could. I stepped back and said nothing. But then I heard my son-in-law whisper something. Someone needs to settle the remaining balance of $500,000 now. And suddenly I realized this perfect wedding wasn't as perfect as it looked. Before we continue, please subscribe to the Her Revenge Sparks channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are watching from now. We might give you a shout-out in our next video. Today's shout-out goes to Elaine Prince from New Bern, North Carolina. Thank you for being part of this great family. Now let me tell you everything that happened. My name is Dorothea Sinclair, and for most of my life I have measured time not by calendars, but by stitches. I can tell you the year my daughter lost her first tooth by the dress I was hemming that week. I can tell you when she had her first heartbreak by the lace I had to unpick 3 times because my hands wouldn't stop trembling. And I can tell you the exact moment my life split in two. The day my husband Edmund collapsed in our kitchen when Celeste was just 11 years old. 1 minute he was laughing, asking if we had any more of that peach pie left. The next he was on the floor, and everything after that moved too fast and too slow at the same time. After the funeral, the house felt bigger, emptier, and unbearably quiet. Celeste stopped sleeping through the night. I stopped sleeping altogether. There was no time to fall apart. I had a skill, one that most people overlooked until they desperately needed it. I could take something torn, uneven, or poorly made and make it beautiful again. So I turned that into survival. I started taking in more work. Prom dresses, bridesmaid gowns, wedding dresses. Anything that needed adjusting, reshaping, rescuing. I worked out of our small living room at first, then the dining table. Then eventually I converted the spare bedroom into a proper workspace. Though proper was still a generous word. It was cramped, always a little too warm, and constantly filled with the soft hum of my sewing machine. But it paid the bills, barely. There were nights I would stay up until 3 o'clock in the morning finishing a rush job for a bride who needed her dress ready by sunrise. Then I'd get Celeste up for school at 6, pack her lunch, smile like everything was fine, and send her out the door. She never saw the exhaustion. I made sure of that. At least I tried to. When Celeste was younger, she didn't care that our house was small or that her clothes were sometimes second-hand. She would sit beside me while I worked, swinging her legs and asking questions about every bead, every seam. "Mom, how do you make it look so perfect?" And I would smile and say, "It's not about perfect, sweetheart, it's about patience." Back then, she used to say she wanted to be just like me. But somewhere along the way that changed. I noticed it slowly at first. It wasn't one big moment, it was 100 small ones. The way she hesitated before inviting friends over, the way she'd casually mention that other girls' moms worked in offices, wore heels, carried leather bags. The way she started asking if we could shop somewhere a little nicer. I did what I could. On special occasions, I saved up to buy her new clothes not from thrift stores, but from real boutiques. I remember the first time I bought her a dress that wasn't on clearance. She lit up like it was Christmas morning. For a moment I thought I had done something right. But that moment didn't last. By the time she reached high school, Celeste had learned something I had spent my whole life trying to ignore. People judge you before you even open your mouth. And she hated being judged. I still remember the night she came home from a school event, her eyes red, her makeup smudged. She didn't cry often, not even after her father died, but that night she couldn't hold it in. "They laughed at me, Mom," she said, her voice shaking. "Who did?" I asked, already feeling that familiar tightness in my chest. "Some girls. Their parents were talking. They asked what you do." She hesitated. "When I said you're a seamstress, they just looked at each other." I reached for her hand. "There's nothing wrong with what I do. I know that." She snapped a little too quickly. Then softer. "I just don't want to feel different all the time." That was the first time I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit. It wasn't just the world that made Celeste feel small. It was the comparison. And comparison has a way of turning love into embarrassment. Still, I told myself it was just a phase. Teenagers go through things. They grow. They struggle. They come back to themselves. And for a while she did. College changed her again, but in a way I didn't fully understand at the time. She became more polished, more confident, more careful. The first time she brought Nathaniel Hargrove home, I remember thinking he looked like he had stepped out of one of those glossy magazines people leave on coffee tables to impress guests. He was charming, well-spoken, knew exactly how to say the right thing at the right time. "Mrs. Sinclair," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "Celeste has told me so much about you." I smiled politely. "I hope it was all good." He laughed. "Only the best." But something about it felt rehearsed. Not wrong, just practiced. Over dinner, he talked about his family, how they had deep roots in Charleston, how they had been members of certain clubs for generations, how tradition mattered to them. I noticed the way Celeste sat a little straighter beside him, the way she adjusted her tone, her posture, even her laugh. It was subtle, but I saw it. After he left that night, I asked her gently, "Do you like him?" She smiled in a way I hadn't seen before, something softer, but also calculated. "He's everything I've ever wanted, Mom." That answer should have made me happy. Instead, it made me uneasy because I knew my daughter. And I knew when she said something like that, she wasn't just talking about love. She was talking about a life that looked nothing like the one we had lived together. Over the next few months, the changes became harder to ignore. Celeste stopped mentioning me in conversations when we were around other people. She introduced me more vaguely. "This is Dorothea," instead of "this is my mom." She started correcting the way I spoke, suggesting different words, different tones. "Mom, maybe say it like this." "Mom, people usually do it this way." At first I laughed it off, but little by little, those moments added up. Until one day I realized something that hurt more than anything she could have said out loud. My daughter wasn't just trying to fit into a new world. She was trying to rewrite where she came from. And somehow, I had become the part she wanted to erase. I told myself I was imagining it. I told myself love doesn't disappear. Just gets buried under pressure, expectations, fear. But standing there at her wedding, hearing her call me staff without hesitation, I realized something I should have understood long ago. This wasn't a phase. It was a choice. And I had no idea yet just how much that choice was about to cost her. Looking back now, I think the engagement was when everything truly began to unravel. Not loudly, not all at once, but quietly, like a seam coming undone thread by thread. At first, when Celeste told me Nathaniel had proposed, I cried. Not because I was losing her, but because I believed she had found happiness. Real happiness. The kind that stays. The kind that doesn't depend on appearances or approval. She showed me the ring, a large sparkling diamond that caught the light in a way that almost felt too bright, too perfect. I remember holding her hand and thinking how beautiful she looked, how grown she'd become. "Mom," she said, almost breathless, "this is the start of everything." I hugged her tightly. "You've always deserved everything good, sweetheart." At the time I meant love. Now I realize she meant something else. The Hargroves moved quickly after the engagement. Plans were set in motion almost immediately. Venues, planners, tastings. Guest lists that seemed to stretch into the hundreds. It all felt overwhelming. But Celeste, she thrived in it. She spoke a new language now, one filled with words like aesthetic, presentation, impression, and curated experience. Words I had heard before but never lived by. "Mom, the wedding needs to feel cohesive," she explained one afternoon, flipping through a thick binder filled with fabric samples and color palettes. I nodded, trying to follow. "It looks beautiful already." She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "It has to be more than beautiful." That was the first time I felt that quiet distance settling between us like something solid. Still, I wanted to be part of her world, even if I didn't fully understand it. So I offered to help. "You know," I said gently, "if you need anything altered, any last-minute fixes, I'd love to be involved." She hesitated, just for a second. Then she said, "Actually, that might be helpful." That was how it started. Not as her mother, but as something else. The first task was small, adjusting the hem on one of the bridesmaid dresses. Then another needed the straps tightened. Then Claudette's dress had a tear near the seam that no one else could fix without risking the fabric. Each time Celeste would bring the dress to me quietly, almost like a secret. "Mom, can you just handle this? I don't want to stress Fiona." Course I said yes. Always said yes. Soon it became routine. Dresses would appear at my apartment late in the evening and I would work on them through the night, just like I used to. The difference was this time it wasn't for strangers. It was for my daughter. That should have made it feel special, but instead it felt hidden. Because during the day when I visited the venue or attended planning meetings, none of that work existed. I wasn't introduced as the person helping. I wasn't even introduced as her mother. "This is Dorothea," she would say, her tone casual, almost detached. Just Dorothea. No context, no connection. At first I told myself it didn't matter. Names are just words, labels don't change relationships. But deep down I knew better. Because the way people responded to me changed depending on how she introduced me. When I was just Dorothea, I was someone they could overlook, someone they didn't need to impress, someone who didn't belong. And Celeste noticed that too. One afternoon we were at the venue, a grand historic estate with tall columns, manicured gardens, and the kind of polished floors that reflected everything like a mirror. I stood beside her as Fiona walked through the setup. "The seating arrangement will highlight the Hargrove family heritage," Fiona said smoothly. "We'll have a dedicated display for their lineage. It adds such a refined touch." Celeste nodded eagerly. "Yes, that's perfect." I waited, thinking maybe she would mention our side of the family. She didn't. Instead she turned to me and said, "Mom," then quickly corrected herself. "Dorothea, could you check the fabric samples in the car?" It was subtle. So subtle that no one else reacted, but I felt it. That quick correction, that hesitation. Like she had almost said something she wasn't supposed to. I went to the car anyway. And as I stood there holding swatches of silk and chiffon, I realized something that made my chest tighten. She wasn't just leaving things out. She was editing me. Editing our history. Editing the truth. Vivian Hargrove made sure I understood that truth even more clearly. She had a way of speaking that was always polite on the surface, but sharp underneath. "I do so admire people who work with their hands," she said to me one afternoon, her smile thin. "It's such an honest way to live." I nodded. "It keeps me grounded." "Yes," she replied, tilting her head slightly. "Though of course not everyone is meant to remain in that position." I wasn't sure if it was meant as advice or a warning. Probably both. She never said anything openly cruel. She didn't need to. Her tone, her pauses, the way she looked at me, it all carried the same message. You are not one of us. And Celeste heard it too. But instead of pushing back, she adapted. I saw it in the way she started mirroring Vivian's mannerisms, the way she laughed at things she didn't used to find funny, the way she carefully avoided any conversation that might reveal too much about where she came from, about me. One evening after I had just finished repairing a delicate lace sleeve on a reception dress, she stood in front of the mirror, turning slightly to admire the fit. "It's perfect," she said softly. I smiled, feeling a small flicker of warmth. "I'm glad." She met my eyes in the reflection. For a moment, just a moment, she looked like my little girl again. "Thank you, Mom," she said quietly. My heart lifted. But then her phone buzzed. She glanced down, her expression shifting instantly. "Oh, Nathaniel's on his way," she said quickly. "I should get ready." And just like that, the moment was gone. No hug, no lingering connection, just a transition from daughter back to someone else. That night as I packed up my sewing kit, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. A small tag inside the dress, the designer's label, elegant, expensive, recognizable, and beneath it my stitches. Invisible to anyone who didn't know what to look for. Holding everything together. That's when it hit me. I was part of this wedding, essential even, but only in the places no one could see. And the closer we got to the big day, the more I realized that Celeste wasn't just building a new life. She was constructing a version of herself that didn't include me. Not publicly, not proudly, only quietly in the background, like a seam no one notices until it starts to break. A week before the wedding, the air around everything felt tighter, like fabric pulled too far, too fast, threatening to tear if anyone breathed wrong. By then, I had learned to move quietly through Celeste's world. I showed up when she asked. I fixed what needed fixing. I stayed out of the way when she didn't. That afternoon I arrived at the venue earlier than expected. Celeste had texted me that morning. "Can you stop by later? Might need you." No explanation, no details, just need, so I came. The estate looked even more extravagant than before. White tents stretching across the lawn, strings of lights already being tested, floral arrangements arriving in large wooden crates. It was the kind of place that made everything feel important, even the smallest details. But something was off. There was tension in the way people moved. Staff whispering, vendors checking phones more often than usual. A florist arguing quietly with someone near the loading area. I wasn't supposed to notice, but I did. I made my way inside carrying my sewing kit and paused when I heard voices coming from one of the side rooms. Celeste and Nathaniel. Their voices were low, sharp, and nothing like the polished tones they used in front of others. "I told you it would be handled," Nathaniel said, his voice tight with frustration. "And I told you they're asking for confirmation now." Celeste snapped back. "Raymond, Gerald, even Leo's band, they're all calling." There was a pause. Then Nathaniel sighed. My father said he would take care of it. The wedding is in a week, Nathaniel, not next month, not eventually. I stood frozen in the hallway, my hand resting lightly against the wall. I shouldn't have been listening, but I couldn't move. You're overreacting, Nathaniel said, his tone shifting into something calmer, but not kinder. These things always work themselves out. Celeste laughed, but there was no humor in it. No, they don't, not like this. Not when invoices are overdue. Overdue. The word echoed in my mind. There was another pause, heavier this time. Then Celeste's voice softened, almost pleading. I just need this to be perfect, Nathaniel. Just this once. I can't have anything go wrong. And in that moment, I understood something I hadn't fully seen before. This wedding wasn't just a celebration for her. It was proof. Proof that she belonged in a world she had been chasing for years. Proof that she had made it out of the life she had been so desperate to leave behind. And if anything went wrong, that illusion would crack. I said I'll handle it, Nathaniel repeated more firmly now. Stop worrying. But I heard something beneath his words. Not confidence, avoidance. I stepped back quietly before they could come out, my heart beating faster than it should have. For the rest of the afternoon, I moved through the venue in a daze. I watched as staff set up tables with pristine white linens, as decorators carefully arranged centerpieces, as planners checked off lists with practiced efficiency. Everything looked flawless. But now I knew it was all resting on something unstable. Later I found Celeste alone in the bridal suite, flipping through her phone, her leg bouncing restlessly. She looked up when she saw me. Oh, good, you're here, she said quickly. I might need you to check something with the reception dress later. He nodded. Of course. I hesitated, then added gently. Are you okay? She froze. Just for a second, then she forced a smile. I'm fine. Just pre-wedding stress. I stepped closer. Celeste. Something's wrong, Mom, she interrupted sharply. The word hung in the air between us. Raw, unfiltered, real. For a moment I thought maybe, just maybe, we were about to have an honest conversation. But then her expression shifted. Her shoulders straightened and the wall came back up. It's just a lot to manage, she said, her tone smoothing out. You wouldn't really understand how these events work. The words landed harder than I expected. Not because they were cruel, but because they were dismissive. Like everything I had experienced in my life, every wedding I had helped piece back together, every last-minute disaster I had quietly fixed, meant nothing in her world. I've worked on a lot of weddings, Celeste, I said softly. Yes, but this is different, she replied quickly. This is bigger. I nodded slowly. I see. She sighed, running a hand through her hair. I didn't mean it like that. But she had. We both knew it. There was a silence between us then, thick and uncomfortable. I wanted to reach for her, to remind her that she didn't have to carry everything alone, that perfection wasn't worth this kind of pressure. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the way she had already decided I didn't belong in that part of her life. Or maybe it was the realization that she didn't want my kind of help. Not the kind that came with honesty. Not the kind that came with reality. Make sure you bring your kit on the day, she said finally, her voice more controlled now. In case anything goes wrong. I almost smiled at that because things were already wrong. She just didn't want to see it. I will, I said simply. As I turned to leave, she called after me. Mom. Pause. Yes. Her voice softened just slightly. Don't make things complicated. Okay. I just need everything to go smoothly. I stood there for a moment letting her words settle. Then I nodded. I understand. But as I walked out of that room, something inside me shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough. Enough to realize that I had been trying to hold everything together for her while she was building something that had no place for me. And worse, something that might not hold at all. Because no matter how beautiful something looks on the outside, if the foundation underneath it isn't real, it doesn't matter how carefully you stitch it together. Eventually it comes apart. The morning of the wedding arrived with a kind of brightness that felt almost too perfect, like the world itself had decided to cooperate, no matter what was unraveling underneath. Sunlight poured through the tall windows of the bridal suite, catching on glass bottles of perfume, trays of makeup, and the delicate beading of Celeste's gown. Everything shimmered. Everything looked right. But I had learned by then, appearances can lie. I arrived early just like I always did when something mattered. My sewing kit was tucked neatly under my arm, every tool in its place. Needles, thread in 5 different shades of ivory. Small scissors, extra hooks, spare lace. Prepared. I had always been prepared. The room was already buzzing when I stepped inside. Simone, Harper, and Renee moved from one mirror to another, laughter bouncing off the walls, music playing softly in the background. Someone was pouring champagne. Someone else was adjusting flowers. Celeste sat in the center of it all. Like the sun, everything revolved around. She looked beautiful. There was no denying that. Her hair was swept into a soft, elegant style. Her makeup flawless, her posture poised. If anyone had walked in at that moment, they would have seen exactly what she wanted them to see. Perfection. "Dorothea, good you're here," Fiona said briskly when she noticed me. "We might need you on standby." Not mom, not even a name with warmth, just a function. I nodded anyway. Of course. Celeste glanced at me briefly, her expression unreadable, then returned her attention to the mirror. For a moment I stood there unsure where to place myself. I didn't belong with the bridesmaids. I wasn't part of Fiona's team. I wasn't anything visible. So I did what I had been doing for months. I stayed quiet. And I waited. It didn't take long. About 40 minutes before the ceremony, the energy in the room shifted. It started small, Simone noticing something off as Celeste stood to adjust her dress. "Wait, hold on," she said, her fingers hovering near the back seam. "Is that?" Fiona rushed over. "Oh no. Oh no, no, no." I felt it before I even saw it. The tension, the kind that spreads instantly, silently, like a crack through glass. Celeste turned, trying to look over her shoulder. "What is it?" Fiona hesitated, which told me everything. "There's a tear," she admitted. Tear. Right along the back seam of the gown. Not large, but large enough. Large enough that every movement threatened to make it worse. Large enough to ruin everything. The room erupted into controlled chaos. Can it be hidden? Do we have backup fabric? Where's the designer? The ceremony starts in 30 minutes. Voices overlapped, panic rising, solutions falling apart before they could form. And in the middle of it all, Celeste stood frozen. Her perfect composure cracked. "I can't walk out like this," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I can't. This can't be happening." No one answered her because no one knew how, except me. I stepped forward quietly, already opening my kit. "Let me see," I said. For a moment no one reacted. Then Fiona turned to me, desperation in her eyes. You can fix this. I didn't answer right away. I didn't need to. I had seen worse. Handled worse. I moved behind Celeste, my hand steady despite the tension in the room. Breathe, I told her softly. She didn't respond, but she didn't pull away either. That was enough. I examined the tear carefully, my fingers tracing the delicate fabric, assessing the damage. The tension points, the way the seam had given under pressure. It wasn't impossible, just precise. Everyone give me space, I said calmly. Something in my tone must have cut through the panic because people stepped back. Silence settled. All eyes on me. For the next 15 minutes, the world narrowed to needle and thread. Pull adjust. Every stitch placed exactly where it needed to be. Every movement deliberate, careful. I blocked out the whispers, the clock, the pressure. This was what I did. This was who I was. And for those few minutes, I wasn't invisible. I was essential. Done, I said finally, tying off the last stitch. I stepped back. The seam was clean, strong, nearly invisible, better than before. Fiona exhaled loudly. Oh my God, that's incredible. Renee leaned in. Can't even tell. Relief flooded the room. Laughter returned. The crisis was over just like that. Celeste slowly turned, looking at herself in the mirror. Her eyes met mine in the reflection, and for a moment everything else faded. There was no planner, no bridesmaids, no expectations, just us. Mother and daughter. Thank you, she said quietly. 2 words. Soft, real. My chest tightened. You're welcome, sweetheart, I replied, my voice just as soft. And in that moment I thought, maybe she's still in there. Maybe everything I've been feeling, everything I've been fearing, maybe it's not as final as it seems. Maybe she just needs time. But then, all right everyone, let's get moving. Fiona clapped her hands. We're back on schedule. The spell broke instantly. Celeste straightened her posture, her expression shifting back into something composed, controlled. She turned away from me, addressing the room. Let's go. No introduction, no acknowledgement, no explanation of who had just saved her dress. I stood there for a second longer, my hand still, my kit open at my side, listening as the praise moved around the room. Great recovery. Good thing the designer made it sturdy. We're lucky this didn't happen later. No one corrected them, not even Celeste. And just like that I disappeared again. I closed my kit slowly, carefully placing each tool back where it belonged. 'Cause that's what I did. I fixed things quietly, without recognition, without complaint. But this time something felt different. Because as I watched my daughter walk toward the door, perfect, composed, admired, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to fully accept before. She knew exactly what I had done. She knew exactly who I was, and she still chose not to say it, not to claim me, not to stand beside me. That wasn't pressure, that wasn't confusion, that was a decision. And as the music began to swell outside, signaling that the ceremony was about to start, I felt something inside me shift. Not breaking, not yet, but loosening. Like a stitch that had been pulled too tight for too long, finally starting to give. By the time the ceremony began, everything looked exactly the way Celeste had dreamed it would. Rows of white chairs lined the garden aisle. Petals scattered just enough to feel effortless, not staged. The late afternoon sun dipped low, casting that soft, golden light photographers chase and brides pray for. The string quartet played somewhere to the left, their music floating gently through the air like nothing in the world could go wrong. And for most people there, nothing had. They saw beauty. They saw elegance. They saw a perfect beginning. I saw something else. I saw how carefully every detail had been arranged to create that illusion, and how fragile it all really was underneath. I sat near the back, not because I was told to, but because I understood by now where I was expected to be. Not front row, not beside family, just present. A placeholder in a story that no longer had space for me. Guests filled the seats around me, their conversations light, their laughter easy. Caught fragments of it. The Hargroves really outdid themselves. This venue is stunning. Celeste looks like she belongs in a magazine. No one mentioned me. Course they didn't. Why would they? When Celeste walked down the aisle, the entire crowd rose as one. And I'll admit, for a moment my breath caught. She looked radiant. Her dress, our dress, though no one knew. It flowed perfectly with each step. The seam I had repaired held beautifully, invisible under the weight of expectation and admiration. She smiled as she walked toward Nathaniel, her expression soft, almost glowing. And for just a second I let myself feel proud. Because no matter what had happened between us, she was still my daughter, and I had helped her get to this moment, even if no one else knew. The ceremony passed in a blur of vows and applause. Promises spoken with conviction. Rings exchanged with steady hands. A kiss that sealed everything in front of hundreds of witnesses. Everyone clapped. Everyone believed. I clapped too because I had always believed in her, even when she stopped believing in me. Afterward, the crowd shifted toward the reception space. Energy lifting, conversations growing louder, more celebratory. Champagne glasses appeared. Music changed. The atmosphere transformed from reverent to joyful. At least on the surface. I moved quietly through it all, staying near the edges, watching, observing. That's something you learn to do when you spend your life in the background. You see things other people miss. Like the way Nathaniel checked his phone more often than a groom should on his wedding day. Like the way Vivian Hargrove's smile tightened whenever someone mentioned payment or vendors. Like the way Celeste laughed a little too loudly, a little too perfectly, like she was trying to stay ahead of something no one else could see. And then came the photographs. "Family first," Marcus called out, clapping his hands. People gathered quickly. The Hargroves stepped forward immediately. Nathaniel's parents, cousins, extended relatives I had never met, but who carried themselves like they belonged in that moment. I stayed where I was. Not because I didn't want to be there, but because I didn't know if I was supposed to. Celeste stood at the center, her arm linked through Nathaniel's, her smile bright and unwavering. Marcus looked around. Bride's family. There was a pause. A small one, but I felt it. I took a step forward, just one. Celeste's eyes flicked toward me, and for a heartbeat I thought she might say it. But instead she turned slightly toward Marcus and said, "We can start with this group. This group. Not ours, not mine, just this." I stopped where I was. No one questioned it. No one asked if someone was missing. Because from the outside nothing looked incomplete. Flash, flash, flash. Each photo capturing a version of reality that didn't include me. I stepped back again, retreating into the safety of invisibility. It shouldn't have hurt anymore. I had already been preparing myself, but pain doesn't always listen to reason. It lingers, waits, and sometimes it grows. The reception moved forward, dinner service beginning, speeches lined up, music shifting into something livelier. I found myself standing near one of the side tables, sipping water I didn't taste, watching people celebrate a story I knew wasn't entirely true. That's when it happened. Patricia approached me, mid-50s, well-dressed, curious but polite. "I'm sorry," she said with a warm smile. "I don't think we've met. How do you know the bride?" The question was simple, normal, the kind of question that should have had the easiest answer in the world. I opened my mouth, but before I could speak, Celeste's voice cut in. "Oh, she's just helping with some last-minute dress fixes." Light, casual, effortless, like she had said it 100 times before. Patricia nodded, satisfied. "Oh, how lovely. You did a wonderful job. The dress is stunning." "Thank you," I said automatically, because what else was there to say? Patricia moved on. The moment passed, but something inside me didn't. I stood there, the words echoing in my mind. Just helping. Not mother, not family, not anything that connected me to her. Just a function, a role, disposable. I looked at Celeste. She didn't look back. She was already laughing at something Nathaniel had said. Her hand resting lightly on his arm, completely at ease. Or at least pretending to be. And that's when I understood something clearly, painfully, finally. She hadn't made a mistake. She hadn't slipped. She'd chosen that answer. Chosen it because it fit the version of herself she wanted everyone to see. And I didn't fit. So I did the only thing I had left to do. I stepped back again, further this time. Out of the center, out of the frame, out of the story she was telling the world. But as I turned away, ready to disappear quietly like I always had, I heard something else. Not meant for me, not said loudly, but clear enough. Gerald speaking to one of the coordinators. His voice low, urgent. "We need confirmation on the remaining balance. If it's not settled soon, we can't continue full service." The coordinator frowned. "Tonight, within the hour," he replied. "Within the hour." Pause. Just long enough to feel the weight of those words settle into place. And suddenly everything made sense. The tension, the forced smiles, the careful avoidance. This wedding wasn't just fragile emotionally. It was unstable in every way. And for the first time that day, I realized something that shifted everything inside me. They didn't just need appearances to hold. They needed money. Real money. And as I slowly turned my gaze back toward Celeste, toward the daughter who had just erased me in front of strangers, I had a feeling she was about to remember exactly who I was. I didn't move right away. I stayed where I was, half hidden behind a tall floral arrangement, watching the room with a kind of quiet clarity I hadn't felt all day. Once you stop expecting to be seen, you start seeing everything. The change didn't happen all at once. It crept in slow, subtle, but unmistakable. First, it was the champagne. Servers who had been circulating effortlessly suddenly slowed their trays, no longer replenished as quickly. A few guests noticed, laughing it off at first. "Guess we drank them dry already," someone joked. But then came the pause between courses. The kind of pause that stretches just a little too long. The kind that makes people glance at their watches, at each other, at the staff. Then the music faltered. Not completely, just a shift. Leo's band lowered their volume, exchanged quiet looks, one of them stepping aside to speak with someone from the coordination team. Little cracks everywhere. I watched Nathaniel near the bar. His phone pressed tightly to his ear. His back turned to the room. His shoulders were tense, his voice low but sharp. "I don't care what he said. I need it wired now. No, not tomorrow, tonight." He paced as he spoke, running a hand through his hair in a way that broke his polished image completely. Not composed, not confident, panicked. Vivian wasn't much better. She moved from group to group with a tight smile. Her voice sweet but strained, trying to maintain the illusion. Everything is just running a little behind, she told a cluster of guests. You know how these things are. But her eyes kept flicking toward the entrance, toward the staff, toward the cracks. And Celeste. She was still in the center of the room, still smiling, still playing her part. But I could see it now. The effort. The way her fingers tightened around her glass. The way her laughter came just a second too late. The way her eyes searched for Nathaniel. And didn't find him. It didn't take long. Eventually, the truth has a way of forcing its way to the surface. Gerald approached the head table again, this time not as quietly. I couldn't hear every word, but I saw enough. The shift in posture, the sudden stillness, the way Celeste's smile froze in place. And then she stood up. Not gracefully, not like a bride making a grand entrance, but quickly, urgently. And she began scanning the room, looking for something or someone. Her gaze passed over dozens of faces until it landed on me. For a moment we just looked at each other across the distance, across everything that had happened, and I saw it. Not pride, not distance, not performance. Fear. Raw, unfiltered, real. She started walking toward me. Fast, her heels clicking sharply against the floor, cutting through the music, through the chatter, through the illusion that everything was still under control. I didn't move. I didn't step forward. I didn't step back. I simply waited. Because for the first time that day, she was the one coming to me. "Mom," she said when she reached me, her voice low, breath uneven. The word landed differently now. Not hidden, not corrected, not replaced, but also not spoken with pride. Spoken with need. "Can we talk?" she asked quickly, glancing around as if making sure no one was paying attention. He nodded. We moved toward a quieter corner near the hallway leading to the restrooms, away from the main crowd, away from the eyes that might notice. As soon as we were out of sight, the mask slipped. Completely. "I need your help," she said, the words rushing out. Course she did. I stayed silent, letting her continue. "There's an issue with the payments," she said, her voice trembling now. "Some of the vendors haven't been fully settled yet, and the venue," she swallowed, struggling to keep her composure. "They're threatening to stop service if we don't take care of it immediately." I listened. Calm still. "How much?" I asked. She hesitated. And in that hesitation I already knew. 35,000, she said finally, barely above a whisper. $35,000. I didn't react outwardly, but inside something shifted. Not shock, not exactly. More like confirmation of everything I had suspected, of everything I had heard, of everything she had tried so hard to hide. "That's a lot," I said quietly. "I know," she said quickly. "I know, but it's just temporary. Reginald is supposed to transfer the funds, but there's been some delay, and we just need to cover it for now. Just for tonight, until everything clears. Just for tonight. Until everything clears." The words sounded familiar, like promises I had heard before. Promises that always came with conditions, always came with expectations, always came with the assumption that I would say yes. "You sold the house last year, right?" she added, her voice softer now, almost careful. "You told me you had some savings." There it was. The assumption, the belief that I had something to give, that I existed as a solution. I looked at her. Really looked at her, at the carefully done makeup now slightly smudged at the corners, at the perfect dress I had fixed with my own hands, at the fear she was trying and failing to control. And I thought about everything. The years, the sacrifices, the moments I had stood beside her, behind her, for her, invisible when it was convenient, essential when it was necessary. "Celeste," I said gently, "what am I to you? When people are watching?" The question caught her off guard. Her brow furrowed slightly. "You heard me," I said, my voice still calm. "When someone asks who I am, what do you say?" "This isn't the time for that," she replied quickly, frustration creeping in. "We can talk about that later. Right now I just need—" "No," I interrupted softly. "For once, this is exactly the time." She stared at me, her eyes searching, her patience thinning. "Mom, please," she said, her voice tightening. "I'm asking for your help." And for the first time that night, I realized something with complete clarity. She wasn't asking as my daughter. She was asking as someone who needed something, something I had, something she believed she could still take because she always had. And standing there in that quiet hallway with the sound of a celebration slowly unraveling just beyond the walls, I understood that this moment, this exact moment, was going to decide everything. Not just for her but for me. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The music from the reception drifted faintly down the hallway. Muffled laughter, clinking glasses, the distant hum of a celebration that was already beginning to crack at the edges. But here, in this quiet corner, it felt like everything had stopped. Celeste stood in front of me, waiting, expecting, the same way she always had. I took a slow breath, letting the silence stretch just enough to settle something inside me. "Answer me," I said gently. "When people are watching, who am I to you?" Her jaw tightened. "Mom, please," she said again, this time more urgently. "I don't have time for this. They're about to shut everything down out there." "I understand that," I replied. "But I still need you to answer." She looked at me like I was being unreasonable, like I was making things harder, like I was inconvenient. The realization didn't hurt as sharply as it would have before. Just clarified things. "You're my mother," she said finally, the words coming out quickly, almost mechanically. I tilted my head slightly. "Say it like you mean it." Her eyes flashed with frustration. "What does that even mean?" "It means," I said calmly, "the way you say it in here should match the way you say it out there." She froze. Because now she understood. Now she couldn't pretend not to. "That's not fair," she said after a moment, her voice lowered, defensive. "You're bringing that up now, in the middle of everything." "I'm bringing it up," I replied softly, "because everything else seems to depend on who I am to you." She let out a breath, running her hands through her hair in agitation. "You know who you are to me," she said. "Why are you making me say it like this?" "Because you didn't say it before," I answered. That landed. I saw it in the way her expression flickered, in the way her eyes dropped for just a second. Then came the shift, the pivot, the one I had seen her use before when emotion got too close, when truth became uncomfortable. She stepped back slightly, straightening her posture, regaining control. "Look," she said, her tone changing, becoming more composed. "We can talk about feelings later. Right now, this is a practical situation. The venue needs payment, and we need to keep things moving. Not us, not mother and daughter, just we. A problem to solve, a transaction to complete." I nodded slowly. "All right," I said. "Then let's talk practically." Relief flickered across her face, quick and hopeful. "Okay," she said, stepping closer again. "Good. So if you can just cover the amount for now." "I can't," I said. The words came out steady, clear, final. She blinked. "What?" "I can't cover it," I repeated. For a moment, she just stared at me like she hadn't heard correctly, like her mind was refusing to process what I had said. "Mom, what do you mean you can't?" she asked, her voice rising slightly. "You sold the house. You told me you had savings." "I told you I sold the house," I said. "I didn't say I had money left." Her confusion deepened. "What are you talking about?" I held her gaze. "I sold the house to pay off your father's medical debt," I explained quietly. "And the rest went to covering the years we fell behind while I was raising you alone." Her mouth parted slightly. No words came out. "I moved into a smaller place," I continued. "I've been working just as much as I always have. Nothing about my situation is different, except the address." "You didn't tell me that," she said finally, her voice smaller now. I gave a faint, almost sad smile. "You didn't ask." That one hit harder. "You always managed," she said, almost to herself. "You always made things work." "Yes," I said gently, "because I had to." Another pause. This one longer, more uncomfortable. "Okay," she said after a moment, forcing herself back into problem-solving mode. "Okay, fine, then maybe you can borrow it or put it on a credit line. Just temporarily. Just until Reginald sorts it out." There it was again. The assumption that I would stretch, that I would bend, that I would carry the weight because I always had. I shook my head. "No." This time the word was firmer. She stepped back slightly, like she had been physically pushed. "What do you mean no?" she asked, her voice rising again. "This is my wedding, Mom. Everything is happening right now. I need you." I looked at her carefully. "You needed me earlier too," I said. "When someone asked who I was." Her face flushed. "That's not the same thing," she said quickly. "That was just—" "What?" I asked softly. She hesitated, searching for a word that would make it sound better, for a justification that would make it acceptable. "It was just easier," she said finally. "Easier?" I nodded slowly. "Yes," I said. "It probably was." She exhaled sharply, frustration building again. "Why are you doing this?" she demanded. "Why are you making this harder than it already is?" "I'm not making it harder," I replied calmly. "I'm just not fixing it for you." Her eyes widened. "Fixing it," she repeated. "You're my mother. You're supposed to help me." "I have helped you," I said, "your entire life." My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "I helped you when you had nothing. I helped you when things were difficult. I helped you when no one else did. And today," I paused just long enough for the weight of it to settle. "Today, I helped you when your dress was falling apart." She swallowed. Her gaze dropped briefly to the floor. "But now," I said softly, "this isn't about helping you stand. This is about helping you pretend." That landed hard. Her head snapped up. "That's not fair," she said, her voice shaking now, not just with frustration, but with something deeper. "You don't understand what this means to me." "Then help me understand," I said gently. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're trying to build a life that doesn't include me unless you need something." Her lips trembled slightly. For a moment I thought she might say something real, something honest, but instead she looked away. And that told me everything. Outside, the music dipped again, a signal. Time was running out. She took a step back, her breathing uneven, her composure slipping. "I don't have time for this," she said, more to herself than to me. "I just need to figure something out." He nodded. "Yes," I said quietly. "You do." She looked at me one last time, not with anger, not exactly, but with something closer to disbelief, like she had just discovered that something she had always relied on wasn't there anymore. Then she turned and walked back toward the reception, alone. I stayed where I was for a moment longer, listening as the sounds of the wedding continued, faint, strained, uncertain. And for the first time that day, I didn't feel invisible. Felt seen by myself. And that was enough. I didn't follow her back right away. For the first time that entire day, I allowed myself to stay still without waiting for someone to need me. The hallway felt quieter now, not empty, but separated from the performance happening just a few steps away. I leaned lightly against the wall, my fingers resting on the handle of my sewing kit, and listened. Not just to the music but to everything beneath it. There's a difference between noise and truth. And once you've heard the truth, you can't unhear it. After a few minutes, I walked back toward the reception, slowly, not rushing, not reacting, just observing. The shift was undeniable now. Guests were no longer fully engaged in celebration. Conversations had grown quieter, more fragmented. People were checking their phones. Some were glancing toward the exits, not leaving yet, but considering it. Leo's band was still playing, but softer, less confident. And the staff had changed completely. They were no longer moving with ease. There was hesitation in their steps, uncertainty in their eyes. A few of them stood near the service area speaking in hushed tones, waiting for direction that wasn't coming. Because direction required decisions, and decisions required money. I spotted Nathaniel near the back of the room again. His posture tighter than before, his voice sharper. "I told you this needed to be handled," he said into his phone, his teeth clenched. "No, I don't care what the bank said. Figure it out." He ended the call abruptly, shoving the phone into his pocket. For a moment, he just stood there, his carefully constructed composure completely gone. Then he turned and caught sight of me. Eyes met. And in that instant, I saw something I hadn't seen before. Not indifference, not polite distance, calculation. He walked toward me, not fast, not slow, just deliberately. "Mrs. Sinclair," he said when he reached me. His tone controlled but tight around the edges. He nodded. "Nathaniel." He glanced briefly around us, making sure no one was paying attention. "Celeste said she spoke to you," he continued. "I'm sure she did." Then he exhaled like he was trying to reset himself. "Look," he said, lowering his voice slightly. "I understand this is a stressful situation for everyone, but we just need a temporary solution." Temporary, that word again. "I'm listening," I said calmly. His jaw flexed slightly like he wasn't used to not being immediately agreed with. "The funds are coming," he said. "There's just been a delay with the transfer. My father's handling it." I tilted my head slightly. "Is he?" That seemed to irritate him. "Yes," he said firmly. "He is." I held his gaze. "Because from what I've heard," I replied evenly, "vendors have been waiting for confirmation for days." That hit something. His expression flickered just for a second. Then it hardened. "Weddings like this involve a lot of moving parts," he said. "Delays happen." "Of course they do," I agreed. "But usually not this many. Not this close to the event." Another pause. This one heavier, more uncomfortable. "You're making assumptions," he said. "No," I replied softly. "I'm noticing patterns." He didn't like that. Could tell. People like Nathaniel preferred control, preferred narratives they could manage, preferred situations where others played their roles without question. And I wasn't doing that, not anymore. He took a step closer, lowering his voice further. Celeste told me you're not willing to help, he said. I told her I can't, I corrected. That's not the same thing, he replied quickly. I looked at him. It is when the outcome is the same. His patience was thinning now. I think you're underestimating how serious this situation is, he said. If this isn't resolved, the reception could shut down publicly. I'm aware, I said. And you're okay with that, he pressed. There was the pressure, the implication that I would be responsible, that I would be the one letting everything fall apart. I met his gaze steadily. I'm not the one who built it on something unstable, I said. That landed hard. His expression tightened, his composure slipping just enough to reveal what was underneath. You don't understand how these things work, he said, echoing Celeste's earlier words almost exactly. A small, sad smile touched my lips. I understand more than you think, I replied, because I did. I understood what it meant to stretch beyond your means. I understood what it meant to promise more than you could deliver. I understood what it meant to hold everything together with nothing but effort and hope. The difference was I had never built something I couldn't afford to sustain. You're making this personal, he said, his tone sharpening. It is personal, I answered simply. That seemed to catch him off guard. This is about finances, he insisted. No, I said. This is about honesty. Another silence. Longer this time. Then something shifted, subtly but clearly. He straightened slightly, his tone changing, not softer but more direct. All right, he said. Let's be honest then. Waited. My family has expectations, he continued. Standards, appearances matter. That's how this world works. I didn't interrupt. And Celeste understands that, he added. She's worked very hard to position herself appropriately. Appropriately, there it was. The word that explained everything. She deserves this wedding, he went on. She deserves to step into a life that reflects her potential. And what does that life reflect? I asked quietly. He didn't hesitate. Success. I held his gaze. And what happens when the success isn't real? He didn't answer right away because he couldn't. Because somewhere deep down he knew. You're focusing on the wrong things, he said finally. No, I replied. I think I'm focusing on the only thing that matters. Truth. It hung there between us, uncomfortable, unavoidable. Then from across the room, raised voices cut through the tension. Not loud enough to stop everything, but loud enough to draw attention. We both turned. Celeste standing near the head table, her posture tense, her face pale beneath the makeup. And beside her Gerald, speaking more firmly now, more visibly. Guests nearby had started to notice. Whispers were spreading, eyes were turning. The illusion was cracking. Nathaniel exhaled sharply, running a hand over his face. This is not happening, he muttered. But it was, and there was nothing left to hide it. I looked at him one last time. You should go to her, I said quietly. He didn't argue, didn't respond. He just turned and walked quickly across the room toward the problem he could no longer avoid. I stayed where I was, watching. Not with satisfaction, not with anger, but with clarity. Because now everything was visible. The truth about the money, the truth about the family, the truth about the life Celeste had been trying to step into. And the hardest truth of all, that the world she had chosen over me was never real to begin with. The room didn't fall silent all at once. It unraveled in layers. At first, it was just a shift in volume, the music dipping lower than it should have, conversations tapering off instead of building. Then came the looks, the kind people try to hide but can't quite manage. Side glances, raised brows, the quiet passing of information from one guest to another. And at the center of it all, Celeste, standing beside the head table, her shoulders pulled back, her posture still perfect, but her eyes no longer steady. Gerald stood near her, speaking with the careful firmness of someone who had repeated the same sentence too many times already. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we do need confirmation within the next 30 minutes. Otherwise, we'll have to suspend certain services." Suspend, such a polite word for something so public, so humiliating. Nathaniel reached her quickly, stepping between her and Gerald with a tight, controlled smile. "Everything's being handled," he said smoothly. "There's no need to escalate this." Gerald didn't look convinced. "I understand, sir," he replied. "But we've already extended beyond the agreed terms. We just need assurance." Assurance. Another polite word, another quiet demand. Celeste's eyes flickered between them, her composure cracking just enough for those paying attention to notice. And now people were paying attention. I could feel it. The shift in the room, curiosity turning into concern, concern turning into suspicion. Because no matter how beautiful a wedding is, people always notice when something feels off. And this felt off. I stepped a little closer, not into the center, but close enough to hear more clearly. Not to intervene, just to witness. "Nathaniel," Celeste whispered, her voice tight, barely controlled. "What's happening?" "I told you it's under control," he replied quickly, not quite meeting her eyes. "That's not what it looks like," she said, her voice shaking now. "It will be fine," he insisted. But his tone lacked conviction. And she heard it. Course she did. Because for the first time that day she wasn't performing, she was reacting. Gerald cleared his throat slightly. "Again, I apologize," he said. His voice still professional, still measured. "But without confirmation, we'll need to delay the next course. And potentially the cake service." That did it. Even the guests who had been pretending not to notice noticed. A murmur rippled through the room, soft but undeniable. "Is everything okay?" someone asked nearby. "I think there's a problem with the payment," another whispered. The word spread quickly because rumors always do. And once they start, they don't stop. Celeste's face paled. She turned slightly, scanning the room, the eyes, the whispers, the shift in energy. Everything she had worked so hard to control slipping. "I need a minute," she said suddenly, her voice barely holding together. She stepped away from the table, from Nathaniel, from Gerald. And for a moment it looked like she might run. Not physically but emotionally. Like she might collapse under the weight of everything pressing in on her. Then her eyes found me again across the room. But this time she didn't come to me. Not immediately. Instead she hesitated. Just for a second, like something inside her was fighting itself. Pride, fear, reality. And then she turned away, back toward Nathaniel, back toward the life she had chosen, back toward the illusion she was still trying to hold together. "I'll handle it," she said, her voice louder now, more controlled, meant for others to hear. Nathaniel looked at her, surprised. "How?" he asked quietly. She didn't answer, not directly, but I saw the shift. The decision forming, the one she'd been avoiding all day. She turned to Gerald. "We'll take care of the balance," she said, her tone steady, practiced. "You have my word." Gerald nodded, though his expression remained cautious. "Thank you, ma'am. We'll need confirmation shortly." Shortly, time was closing in. Celeste nodded once, then turned again, this time moving with purpose, but not toward me, toward the center, toward the crowd, toward the stage where speeches were supposed to happen. I felt it before she even spoke, that this was about to change everything. She picked up the microphone. The room quieted instinctively, because that's what people do when the bride speaks. They listen. They expect something beautiful, something emotional, something perfect. Celeste took a breath, held it, then released it slowly. "Hi, everyone," she began, her voice steady, though not as light as before. A few smiles, a few nods, normal for now. "I just wanted to say thank you for being here tonight," she continued. "It means so much to me, to both of us, to have all of you celebrating this moment with us." Her words were right, carefully chosen, appropriate, but there was something underneath them now. Something real. Something strained. She glanced briefly toward Nathaniel, then toward his family. Then, for the first time since she had picked up that microphone, toward me. Our eyes met, and in that moment I saw it. Not fear, not pride, but something else. Something closer to truth. "I've spent a long time trying to build a life that looks a certain way," she said slowly. The room shifted subtly, because this wasn't the kind of speech people expected. "I thought if everything looked perfect, then it would be perfect," she continued. Was. Long enough for people to start listening more closely. "To feel like I belonged," she added. That word, belonged, it hung in the air, heavy, meaningful. And suddenly, this wasn't just a wedding speech anymore. This was something else, something deeper, something closer to breaking. I felt my chest tighten. Not from pain, but from recognition. 'Cause I knew that feeling. I had lived it differently, but I understood it. Celeste took another breath, her grip on the microphone tightening slightly. And I thought if I could just get everything right, then no one would question where I came from. There was the truth. Finally. Not hidden, not softened, spoken out loud. A ripple moved through the room. Confusion, curiosity, discomfort. Nathaniel shifted beside her. "Celeste," he murmured under his breath, but she didn't stop, not this time. Because once the truth starts coming out, it doesn't go back in. "I thought I had to change parts of myself," she continued, "to fit into something bigger." Her voice wavered slightly, just enough. "And in doing that," she paused, her eyes flickering toward me again, "I forgot something important." Silence. Complete now. The kind that fills every corner of a room, the kind that makes people lean in, wait, listen. And I realized this wasn't about the money anymore, not really. This was about something else, something much bigger. And whatever she was about to say next was going to decide everything. The silence stretched so tightly it felt like it might snap. Every eye in the room was on Celeste. Leo's band had stopped completely now. No soft background music, no clinking glasses, no polite conversation to soften the moment, just her voice. And whatever truth she was about to let out. Nathaniel shifted beside her, his hand hovering near her elbow like he wanted to guide her away from the microphone without making a scene. "Celeste," he said under his breath, low but urgent, "this isn't the time." But she didn't look at him, not this time. Her gaze stayed forward for a moment longer, then slowly moved across the room, scanning faces, guests, strangers, people who had come to witness something perfect. Then finally, she looked at me and didn't look away. My whole life, she said, her voice quieter now but somehow stronger. I've been trying not to feel small. The words landed gently, but heavily. I grew up watching people treat my mother differently because of what she did for a living, she continued. Not because she wasn't capable, but because they didn't think it was enough. A few guests shifted uncomfortably. Vivian Hargrove stiffened at her table, her smile fading. Nathaniel's expression tightened, but Celeste kept going. And somewhere along the way, I started to believe them. That admission hung in the air, raw, unfiltered. I started thinking that if I could just step into a different world, a more polished one, then maybe I wouldn't feel that way anymore. She swallowed, her grip on the microphone tightening. So I changed things, she said. The way I spoke, the way I presented myself, the way I told my story. Her eyes flickered again toward me. And even who I acknowledged. A ripple moved through the crowd, because now they were beginning to understand. Not everything, but enough. Nathaniel stepped closer, his voice firmer now. That's enough, he said quietly. We can talk about this later. But Celeste shook her head. No, she said, not loud, not dramatic, but certain. For once, I think I need to say this now. There was something different in her voice. Not desperation, not performance, something steadier, something honest. She took a breath and then she said it. The woman standing over there. She lifted her hand slightly, pointing. Not vaguely, not carefully, directly. Every head turned toward me just like that. I felt it, the shift, the attention, the weight of being seen after hours of being invisible. I didn't move, didn't react. I simply stood there, letting it happen. That's my mother. Celeste said, no hesitation this time, no correction, no softening, just truth. She's the one who raised me, she continued. By herself after my father died. A murmur moved through the room, not loud but present. She worked day and night, Celeste went on. Fixing dresses, saving weddings, making things beautiful for other people, even when her own life wasn't easy. My chest tightened, not from hurt, from something else. Something I hadn't expected. She taught me how to be strong, Celeste said. How to keep going when things fall apart, how to make something whole again, even when it seems impossible. Her voice wavered just slightly. And today, she added, she fixed my dress right before the ceremony when no one else could. That drew a stronger reaction, surprise, recognition. A few guests turned to each other whispering. She did. I thought it was the designer. No, I saw her earlier. The truth was spreading piece by piece. And once it starts, it doesn't stop. Celeste's gaze stayed locked on me, and then she said, her voice breaking just a little now. I told them she was staff. Silence. Complete. The kind that feels heavier than any noise. I said that, she continued, her voice quieter, more fragile. Not because I didn't know who she was, but because I was afraid of what people would think if I told the truth. There it was. No excuses, no deflection, just honesty. And honesty has weight. Nathaniel stepped in again, his voice sharper now. Celeste, stop, he said. You're making this worse. She turned to him then, finally. And for the first time all day, she didn't look smaller beside him. She looked clearer. No, she said. I've been making it worse all day by pretending. That landed not just on him, on everyone. She turned back to the room. To my guests, she said, her voice steadier now. I'm sorry. Another ripple, soft, confused, curious. Not because something isn't perfect, she continued, But because I tried so hard to make it look perfect that I forgot what actually matters. Her eyes found mine again, and this time they didn't look away. I forgot to be proud of the person who made me who I am. Something inside me shifted, not broken, not fixed, just moved. Vivian stood abruptly from her seat. "This is inappropriate," she said, her voice cutting through the room. "This is not the time." "For what?" Celeste interrupted. Her tone wasn't loud, but it was firm. "For honesty." Vivian's lips pressed into a thin line. "This is a wedding," she said, "not a confession." Celeste held her gaze. "Maybe it should be both," she replied. That changed something. You could feel it, in the room, in the air, in the way people were no longer just watching. They were listening. Really listening, because the story had shifted from performance to truth. Celeste lowered the microphone slightly, then raised it again. "One last time. I don't know how tonight is going to end," she said. "I don't know what's going to happen with everything else." A glance toward Gerald, toward the cracks still forming. "But I do know this." Her voice softened, but it carried. "I don't want to build a life that requires me to hide where I came from." Another pause. "And I don't want to build a life that requires me to hide her." She didn't point this time. She didn't need to. Everyone knew. Everyone was already looking. And in that moment, standing there under the weight of 100 eyes, I wasn't invisible anymore. I was seen. Not as staff. Not as background. But as something real. Something undeniable. Her mother. And for the first time that day, she had said it out loud. The silence after Celeste lowered the microphone felt heavier than anything that had come before. Not awkward. Not empty. But full. Full of everything that had just been said. And everything it meant. No one moved at first. No one clapped. Because this wasn't the kind of moment you applaud. It was the kind you absorb. The kind that makes people shift in their seats, rethink what they've seen, what they've assumed. And for the first time that entire day, the room wasn't focused on perfection. It was focused on truth. Celeste stood there, her shoulders no longer held in that rigid, practiced posture. The tension hadn't disappeared, but it had changed. It wasn't about holding something up anymore. It was about facing what had already fallen. Nathaniel looked at her like he didn't recognize her. Or maybe like he finally did. "This isn't helping anything," he said under his breath. His voice tight, controlled, but no longer confident. "You're turning this into something it doesn't need to be." Celeste turned toward him slowly. Her expression wasn't angry. It wasn't dramatic. It was tired. "No," she said quietly. "I've been turning it into something it wasn't all along." That answer seemed to land deeper than anything louder could have. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "This is a private conversation," he said. "Not something you announce in front of everyone." "Is it private?" Celeste asked, her voice still calm. "Because it didn't feel private when I stood 5 feet away from my mother and told someone she was staff." A murmur rippled again. Because now there was no hiding from it. Nathaniel glanced around the room, clearly aware of the eyes on them now. The attention, the shifting perception. "This is not the time to unravel everything," he said, lowering his voice further. "We can fix this later." Vic. The word echoed. And something in Celeste's expression changed at that. "You keep saying that," she replied softly. "Fix it. Handle it. Take care of it." Her gaze sharpened slightly. "But that's the problem, Nathaniel. Everything is always about fixing how things look, instead of dealing with what they actually are." He exhaled sharply. You're overreacting. No, she said again, still not loud, still not dramatic, but unshakable now. I'm reacting to the truth. That shifted something. Not just between them but in the room. 'Cause people could feel it now. This wasn't just a moment. This was a turning point. Vivian stepped forward again, unable or unwilling to stay quiet any longer. This has gone far enough, she said, her tone sharp, cutting through the air. Celeste, you are embarrassing yourself. Celeste turned toward her. And for a brief second I saw something flicker. Old instinct, old fear. But it didn't stay. I think I've been embarrassing myself for a long time, Celeste said. Just not in a way anyone could see. Vivian's expression hardened. This family has standards, she said. There is a way things are done. And what way is that? Celeste asked, interrupting her. Vivian blinked, caught off guard. Pretending, Celeste continued. Avoiding, hoping no one notices the gaps if everything looks polished enough. The words landed sharply. Because they weren't just directed at Vivian. They were directed at everything. The image. The illusion. At the entire structure this wedding had been built on. Nathaniel stepped in again. His voice firmer now. That's enough, he said. You're crossing a line. Celeste looked at him. Really looked at him. For the first time, she said quietly, I think I'm finally seeing where the line actually is. Was. Heavy. Unavoidable. And I think we've been standing on the wrong side of it, she added. That was the moment something broke. Not loudly, not visibly, but definitively. Nathaniel's composure shifted, not completely gone, but no longer steady. You don't understand how any of this works, he said, echoing the same argument again, but weaker now. Celeste shook her head slightly. No, she said. I understand exactly how it works. Her voice softened. And that's the problem. She took a small step back, creating space, not just physically but emotionally. Nathaniel, she said, her tone more measured now, how much do we actually owe? The question cut through everything. Clean, direct, unavoidable. He hesitated. Just for a second, but it was enough. Nathaniel, how much? She repeated, this time firmer. No room to deflect, no room to redirect. The room held its breath. Because now this wasn't just about emotions. This was about reality. Nathaniel exhaled slowly. More than expected, he said. That wasn't an answer, and she knew it. How much? She asked again. His jaw tightened. Then finally, close to 50,000, he admitted. The number dropped into the room like something heavy. 'Cause it was. Not just financially but symbolically. Everything they had built for this moment resting on something that didn't exist. Celeste didn't react immediately. She didn't gasp, didn't cry. She just stood there taking it in. Letting it settle. Reginald was supposed to handle it, she said. He will, Nathaniel replied quickly. There's just been a delay. Is there? She asked. He hesitated again. And that hesitation said everything. Because delays don't look like that. Uncertainty does. You told me everything was covered, she said, her voice quieter now but sharper. It will be, he insisted. That's not the same thing, she replied. The same words I had said to her. Now coming back around full circle. And if it isn't? She asked. He didn't answer. Because there was no answer that would hold. And for the first time that day Celeste wasn't trying to hold it for him. She turned slightly. Not toward the crowd, not toward Vivian, but toward me. Her eyes met mine again. And this time there was no distance, no performance, no hesitation, just something raw, something real. I thought I was stepping into something better, she said quietly. I didn't interrupt, didn't move. Just listened. But I think I was just stepping into something that looked better, she added. That was the truth. Not loud, not dramatic, but undeniable. The kind of truth that doesn't need volume to be heard. And standing there in a room that had started the evening celebrating perfection, everything had shifted. Because now there was nothing left to pretend. For a moment no one spoke. The number 50,000 hung in the air like a weight no one knew how to carry. It wasn't just a figure. It was a revelation. A confirmation of everything that had been hidden behind polished smiles, curated details, and carefully constructed appearances. And now there was nowhere left to hide it. A few guests began to shift in their seats again. Not dramatically, not rudely, but subtly. The kind of movement that signals discomfort. The kind that says, this isn't what we came here for. But now that we're here, we can't look away. Leo's band remained still. The staff stood frozen at the edges of the room, waiting. Everything paused. Celeste didn't move right away. She stood there absorbing it all. The truth about the money, the silence from Nathaniel, the eyes of the room, the reality she had spent so long trying not to see. Then slowly she exhaled. And something in her posture changed. Not collapsing, not breaking, but releasing. Like she had been holding herself together for so long that she had forgotten what it felt like to stand without tension. I see, she said quietly. Nathaniel stepped toward her again. His voice urgent now. We can still fix this, he said. I just need a little more time. She looked at him. And for the first time since I had met him, she wasn't trying to match his world. She was measuring it. Time isn't what we're missing, she said softly. He frowned. What does that mean? It means, she continued, that this was never actually covered. Her voice wasn't accusing. It was certain. And certainty has a way of cutting deeper than anger. Nathaniel's expression tightened. You're making assumptions again, he said. No, she replied. I'm finally stopping. That seemed to unsettle him more than anything else. Because when someone stops believing the story falls apart. This is not the place to do this, he insisted, lowering his voice. We can step outside, talk privately. No, Celeste said, again steady, clear. No more private conversations that ignore what's already public. A few people shifted again, listening more closely now. Because this wasn't just a conversation anymore. This was a reckoning. Vivian stepped forward once more, her patience gone. This is unacceptable, she said sharply. You are creating a scene. Celeste turned to her. And this time there was no hesitation at all. No, she said calmly. The scene was already there. I just stopped pretending it wasn't. Vivian's lips pressed into a thin line. You don't speak to me that way, she said. Celeste held her gaze. Then maybe I should have learned how to speak differently sooner. That silenced her. Not completely, but enough, because there are moments when authority loses its power, and this was one of them. Nathaniel ran a hand over his face. His composure slipping further. This is getting out of control, he muttered. Celeste looked at him, and something in her expression softened, but not in the way it had before. Not with admiration, not with hope, but with clarity. Was it ever in control? She asked. He didn't answer because he couldn't. Not honestly. And the credit line, she continued quietly. The vendors, the payments, the timelines. Each word precise. Each question intentional. You said it was all handled, she added. I said it would be, he corrected. That's not the same thing, she replied. Again the same truth echoing, returning, breaking through. Silence followed, heavy. Then a voice from the side, not loud but clear. Raymond stepped forward slightly. We've been waiting for confirmation since Tuesday, he said. We were told funds were coming. Another voice joined. We were told the same thing. Then another. And us. The room shifted again because now it wasn't just Celeste and Nathaniel. It was everyone. Everyone who had been promised something. Everyone who had been holding up their part of the illusion, and suddenly the illusion had no foundation left. Celeste closed her eyes for a brief moment. Just one. Then opened them again. And when she did, she looked different. Not transformed but grounded. Like she had finally stepped onto something real. I'm sorry, she said. Not to Nathaniel, not to Vivian, but to the room. To all of you, she continued, her voice steady, for putting you in this position. That mattered because accountability always does. Nathaniel exhaled sharply. So what now? He asked, frustration bleeding through. You're just going to let everything fall apart. Celeste looked at him. No, she said. Then she glanced toward Gerald, toward the staff, toward the people who had been waiting. I'm going to stop pretending it isn't already falling apart, she added. That was the moment. The real one. Not the vows, not the kiss, not the speech. The moment she chose truth over image, reality over performance. The room held still, watching, waiting. And then she did something no one expected. She stepped down from the stage, not toward Nathaniel, not toward Vivian, but toward me. Each step measured, intentional, uncertain, but forward. The distance between us closed slowly. Not just physically but emotionally. And when she reached me, she stopped. For a second she didn't speak, didn't perform, didn't try to fix anything. She just stood there looking at me. Like she was seeing me. Clearly. For the first time in a long time. Mom, she said. The word was different now. Not hidden, not rushed, not used as leverage, but real. And something in my chest tightened. Not painfully but deeply. I'm sorry, she said. 2 words, simple but heavy. I know, I replied softly, because I did. Not everything, not fully, but enough. She swallowed, her eyes glistening slightly now. I didn't just pretend tonight, she said. I've been pretending for a long time. I didn't interrupt, didn't rush to comfort because this mattered. I thought if I could just build something better, something bigger, she continued, then it would make everything before it feels smaller. Her voice wavered. But all it did was make me smaller. That truth settled between us, heavy but honest. And honesty has a way of opening doors that pride keeps shut. Behind us the room still waited, still watched, still held its breath because this wasn't over, not yet. But something had shifted irreversibly. The illusion had broken. The truth had surfaced, and for the first time that day Celeste wasn't trying to hold everything together. She was letting it fall so something real could take its place. For a few seconds the world around us seemed to fade. The voices, the tension, the weight of 100 watching eyes. It all pulled back just enough to leave space for something quieter, something more real. Celeste stood in front of me, her hands trembling slightly at her sides. Her carefully composed exterior finally gone. Not shattered but set aside. And in its place I saw her. Not the version she had been trying to become. Not the polished, curated image she had worked so hard to maintain, but my daughter. The same girl who used to sit beside me while I sewed, asking endless questions about how things came together. The same girl who once believed that patience mattered more than perfection. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she said softly. Her voice wasn't defensive, it wasn't trying to justify anything. It was tired, honest. "I know," I replied. And I did, because these kinds of things don't happen all at once. They build quietly, piece by piece, choice by choice, until one day you don't recognize where you are anymore. "I thought I was just adapting," she continued. "Learning how to fit in. Learning how to belong." Her eyes dropped briefly, then lifted again. But somewhere along the way I stopped asking whether I even wanted to belong to that world. That question lingered. Because it wasn't just about this moment, it was about everything. "I was so afraid of becoming you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The words could have hurt. Once they would have, but now I understood what she meant. Not the surface of it, but the fear underneath. "Not because you weren't strong," she added quickly, "but because I saw how hard everything was for you." Her eyes filled slightly, but she didn't look away. "You were always working, always sacrificing, always carrying everything on your own." I listened quietly. "I thought if I could build something different, something easier," she said, "then maybe I wouldn't have to struggle the way you did." There it was. The truth beneath the truth. Not shame, not rejection, fear. Fear of hardship, fear of instability, fear of becoming someone who had to fight for every inch of stability. "I didn't want you to struggle," I said gently. "I know," she replied, "but I think I confused struggle with failure." That landed, because so many people do. They see effort and mistake it for lack. They see resilience and mistake it for weakness. "I thought if I surrounded myself with people who looked successful," she continued, glancing briefly toward Nathaniel and his family, "then I would feel successful too." "And did you?" I asked softly. She let out a small, humorless breath. "For a while," she admitted. "Till I realized I was spending more energy pretending than actually living. That was the cost. Not the money, not the venue, not the vendors, but the constant performance, the exhaustion of trying to be someone you're not." Behind us the room remained still, watching, waiting, but no one interrupted because even they could feel it now. This wasn't just a conversation, it was a reckoning. "I'm not asking you to fix this," Celeste said after a moment. "I noticed that. The difference." "I know," I replied. "And I'm not asking you to pretend everything's okay," she added. I nodded slightly. "Good." A faint, almost uncertain smile touched her lips, because maybe for the first time in a long time we were speaking the same language again. Honesty. "I don't know how to fix everything out there," she admitted, glancing toward the reception. "You might not be able to," I said. She looked back at me. "Then what do I do?" The question wasn't rhetorical. It wasn't defensive. It was genuine, and that mattered. "You stop trying to make it look perfect," I said, "and you deal with what's real." She absorbed that quietly, thoughtfully. "And if what's real isn't enough?" she asked. I held her gaze. "It's always enough," I said. "It just might not look the way you expected." That's the part people struggle with. Letting go of the image they built in their minds, accepting something different, something less polished but more true. She nodded slowly, then glanced past me toward the room, toward the consequences waiting. "I think I need to end this," she said. I didn't ask what she meant. Already knew. Not just the reception, not just the moment, but everything tied to it. The illusion, the expectation, the life she had been trying to step into. Are you sure? I asked, not to challenge her but to give her space to choose, really choose. She took a breath, then exhaled. Yes. The answer was quiet but solid. Behind us, Nathaniel's voice cut through the stillness. Celeste. We both turned. He was standing a few steps away now, his expression tight, his patience clearly gone. We need to talk, he said. His tone wasn't a request, it was a demand. Celeste straightened slightly, not defensively but with clarity. I think we already have, she replied. That's not what I mean, he said. You're making decisions without thinking this through. I am thinking it through, she said calmly. No, he snapped. You're reacting emotionally. I watched her carefully because this was the moment, the real test. Would she step back into that pattern or stay where she was? She didn't raise her voice, didn't match his frustration. She simply said, I've been ignoring reality for months. This is the first time I'm actually seeing it. That stopped him, not completely but enough. You're going to throw all of this away? He asked, gesturing toward the room, the setup, the entire evening. Celeste followed his gesture, looked at everything, the decorations, the guests, the carefully constructed image. Then she looked back at him. It's already gone, she said, not dramatic, not angry, just true. And I'm not going to keep pretending it isn't. Silence. Heavy. Final. Nathaniel stared at her, searching for something, control, agreement, the version of her he thought he understood. But it wasn't there anymore because she wasn't that version anymore. Not tonight. Not after everything had come apart. And for the first time, he had nothing left to hold on to. Celeste turned back to me. Her expression softer now, not perfect, not healed, but open. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, she said. I know, I replied. And I don't expect things to go back to how they were, she added. They won't, I said gently. She nodded. I just don't want to keep losing you. That was the real fear, not status, not image loss. And this time she wasn't trying to hide it. I reached out, not to fix anything, not to erase what had happened, but just to be there. And she stepped closer, not fully, not completely, but enough. Enough to show that something had changed. Behind us, the room still waited. But whatever came next wouldn't be built on illusion. It would be built on something else, something harder, something quieter, but something real. The reception didn't end with a grand announcement. There was no dramatic exit, no perfectly timed music, no graceful conclusion the way weddings are supposed to have. Instead, it unraveled quietly, like everything else that had been held together too tightly for too long. Celeste walked back toward the center of the room, not with the same polished confidence she had carried earlier, but with something steadier, something simpler. She didn't pick up the microphone again. She didn't try to explain everything. She didn't try to fix the impression. She simply spoke to Gerald directly. Her voice calm, her words clear. We're going to end the reception early, she said. Please go ahead and settle what we can tonight, and we'll follow up properly with the rest. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't clean, but it was honest. Gerald nodded, relieved to have clarity at last. And just like that, the structure of the evening shifted. Leo's band packed up slowly. The staff began clearing tables. Guests gathered their things, conversations now filled with quiet speculation, curiosity, and more than anything, reflection. Some people left quickly. Others lingered, offering polite goodbyes. A few even stepping up to Celeste with unexpected kindness. "I respect what you said," one woman told her softly. "That took courage," another added. Not everyone understood, but enough did. And that mattered. I stayed near the edge of the room, watching it all wind down, not stepping in, not stepping away, just present. Nathaniel didn't come back to her. Not after that final exchange. I saw him speak briefly with Vivian, their conversation sharp, controlled, urgent. Then he moved toward the exit, his expression tight. His phone already back in his hand. Vivian followed not long after, her composure intact, but colder, now more distant. Whatever version of the future they had promised Celeste, it had left with them. And for the first time that day, Celeste didn't chase it. She stood in the middle of the room, no longer the center of attention, but no longer performing for it either, just standing, breathing, existing. When most of the guests had gone and the room had quieted, she finally walked back toward me. Her heels were slower now, less certain but real. "Hi," she said softly when she reached me. I gave a small smile. "Hi." For a moment we just stood there. No pressure, no expectations, just space. Then she let out a breath, almost a laugh, but not quite. "Well," she said, glancing around the nearly empty room. "That didn't exactly go as planned." I couldn't help it. A faint smile touched my lips. "No," I said, "it didn't." She nodded. "But maybe that's okay." There was something in her tone now, not defeat, not regret, but acceptance. The kind that comes after everything falls apart and you realize you're still standing. "I think it is," I replied. She looked at me then, really looked, not past me, not through me, at me. "I don't know what happens next," she admitted. "You don't have to," I said. She considered that, then nodded slowly. "I think I need to figure out who I am without all of that," she said, gesturing vaguely toward the remnants of the wedding. "That's a good place to start," I replied. Another pause, comfortable this time, not heavy, not strained, just quiet. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course." She hesitated. "Will you help me again?" The question was simple, but it wasn't what it used to be. It wasn't about fixing something quickly. It wasn't about saving a situation. It was about rebuilding, slowly, carefully. "I will," I said. "But not the way I did before." She nodded immediately. "I understand." And I believed her because this time, she wasn't asking for a solution, she was asking for a chance. Over the next few months, things didn't magically fall into place. There was no sudden transformation, no instant healing, because real change doesn't work like that. Celeste left Nathaniel, not in a dramatic, explosive way, but in a quiet, final one. After the wedding, more truths came out about the debts, about the promises that had never been real, about the life that had looked stable but wasn't. She moved into a small apartment across town, nothing like the world she had been trying to enter, but enough. She found a job, one that didn't come with status or prestige, but with something more important, honesty. And slowly, very slowly, we started again. Not as if nothing had happened, but with full awareness of everything that had. Coffee once a week, short phone calls, longer conversations, moments of silence that weren't uncomfortable anymore. She didn't rush me, I didn't rush her. We let it rebuild the way things are supposed to, from the inside out. One afternoon, a few months later, she came to my apartment with a garment bag in her hand. She stood in the doorway, smiling, nervous but genuine. "I have an interview tomorrow," she said, "and I was wondering." She trailed off, then held up the bag slightly. Would you take a look at this? I stepped aside. Of course. Inside was a simple dress, no elaborate lace, no expensive designer label, just clean lines, soft fabric, honest. She watched me as I examined it, my fingers instinctively checking the seams, the fit, the small details that make all the difference. It's good, I said. Just needs a slight adjustment here. Relief crossed her face. Thank you. I smiled faintly. You're welcome. As I worked, she sat nearby, just like she used to when she was younger, quiet, observing, present. And for the first time in a long time it felt familiar, not perfect but real. Later that evening, as she was leaving, someone from down the hall passed by and smiled. Is this your daughter? They asked casually. Celeste didn't hesitate, not even for a second. She smiled, looked at me, then back at them. Yes, she said, her voice steady, her expression proud. That's my mother. And this time there was no doubt, no hesitation, no correction, just truth. And somehow that mattered more than any wedding ever could. Sometimes the most expensive bill isn't the one printed on paper. It's the one we build quietly over time through the moments we choose appearance over honesty, pride over love, and image over truth. Celeste thought she was paying for a perfect wedding, but what she was really building was emotional debt. Debt created every time she distanced herself from the person who loved her most. Debt created every time she chose to fit in instead of standing firm. Debt created every time she hid her truth to protect an illusion. And just like any debt, eventually it comes due. But here's the part most people don't talk about. Paying that debt doesn't always mean losing everything. Sometimes it means finally seeing clearly. Sometimes it means letting the illusion fall so something real can take its place. And sometimes it means having the courage to say, I was wrong, and the humility to rebuild what truly matters. Because real wealth isn't status. It isn't appearances. It isn't the kind of life that looks perfect from the outside. Real wealth is knowing who you are and not being ashamed of where you came from.